Welcome, my political friends of the interwebs, and welcome, my sports fans of the interwebs. I never do sports videos, ever. I never do. I think in almost 6 years on YouTube, I don't think I've ever done a video on, well, if I did, it was on auto racing. But anyway, I want to talk a little bit about what just happened today in the world of sports, in the world of collegiate sports. The NCAA just handed down the penalties for Penn State. I kind of want to talk about it. What you're looking at right now is the former statue of the late Joe Paterno, also known as Joe Pa. And if you don't know, I don't know what kind of rock you've been living under, but well, some people are not into sports. But he was the winningest football coach in NCAA, I think, Division I history, or at least was. I mean, up until recently, up until today, he coached the Nittany Lions, the Penn State Nittany Lions. And so I'm not going to get into what all he did. If you don't, you have to Google him. Just Google that whole scene. But here's the thing. What came down today I found very, very interesting. First of all, the reason I called the former statue, they've taken the statue, which used to stand, I guess, out front of the stadium in Penn State. They've removed the statue, and from what I understand, I may be wrong about this, but I don't think I am. From what I understand, they've destroyed it. Interesting. Very Stalin-esque, and what I mean by that is, in the former Soviet Union, if they wanted to get rid of somebody, they wiped the history books clean of them. You know, it's really kind of interesting if you look what's going on. They take the statue. The other thing that the NCAA did today was they decided that they would I guess rescind. I don't know if that's the right word, or expunge all the victories that Joe Paterno had from, I think it was like 1998 to present. No, why is that important? Well, because without those victories, he's no longer in the record books. He's no longer the winningest coach. In fact, I don't even know if he's in the top 10. You know? So, I mean, and to put that in perspective, okay, it would be like as if out of the blue, they've removed all the statues of Babe Ruth and all the records, and said that basically he never stepped up to the plate and hit any of those home runs. You know, I mean, it's bizarre in a way. Now, having said all that, I don't want anybody to hear that's watching this video to think that I do not have sympathy for the victims, because I do. Let me just get that right out of the way. I feel for these victims. Of the child molestation from Jerry Sandusky. I feel for them. It was a horrible situation, and I hope in some small way they're made whole. I don't think they will ever be made. Listen, there's nothing you can do. They're never going to get their innocence back. No matter how much money they end up getting out of this, it's going to be rough. It's going to be rough, and my heart does go out to them. But I just want to, I mean, some of the stuff the NCAA came out with today seems just a little strange to me. They've fined Penn State $60 million. Now, you know, my reaction to that was, well, where'd they come up with that number? Well, I'm reading further, and it says, well, that's what Penn State averages gross-wise from their football program. Their football program brings in $60 million a year on average gross. Now, you know, the reason I'm laughing about that is because, first of all, yeah, I know $60 million is a lot of money, but how do they come up with that particular number? And I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But I think a lot of people would be absolutely astonished to know that there's that kind of money from one school coming in from football. I think they would be absolutely astonished by that. And here's my thought on that. At what point are we going to stop pretending that these are student athletes? Because they're not. They're semi-pro athletes who aren't getting paid. You know, everybody's getting paid except for the guys on the field, which literally makes them, in my opinion, sports slaves. I mean, you know, listen, bottom line, to pretend that they're in this for a quote-unquote education is a little disingenuous, to say the least. And now think about this. Here, let me go over some of the other penalties. We'll talk about this, the rest of that in a second. They're not to be playing in any postseason games for you can't play any bowls or postseason games for the next 4 years. They lose their scholarships. I think for the next 4 years. Now, to make it up to the players that are on the roster now, they can transfer without penalty, which is a very big deal, okay? Except the only people that are going to make out on that are the stars, okay? The rest of the team are screwed. So if you were somebody that was, you know, hoping to be able to, let's say you were a freshman or a sophomore, you know, you may would have been the future star of Penn State and would have maybe been drafted into the NFL and maybe made millions of dollars. You're done. You ain't making squat. You're history. Nobody's going to take you. I mean, you can transfer out of there, which probably wouldn't be a horrible idea because Penn State's going to get killed next season or this season coming up. But where are you going to transfer to? I mean, if you haven't made a name for yourself, I mean, you know, it's going to be tough. Well, and once again, the athletes get screwed. And they do. They absolutely get screwed on this. Penn State and all these college programs are making tens of millions of dollars a year, and they're not paying the athletes a dime. And pretending that they're student athletes and pretending that it's all about getting a free education. Free education, so most of these college football players, now I know it's gotten a lot better over the last couple of decades, but let me tell you, I'll never forget this. Let me share this story with you real quick because it's interesting. 20 years ago, maybe even longer than that, I remember when, and it's no longer in existence, but there used to be a channel on cable called Court TV. It's one of the places where people like Greta Van Susteren got her start. Okay, and they did a lot of things like having cameras in courtrooms and all that stuff. Well, I'll never forget, there was a camera in a courtroom, and there was a former running back from the NFL who had fled to England to avoid child support. Well, they extradited him. He wasn't smart enough to realize that there was an extradition treaty with England. They extradited him from England, okay? And whichever court this was in, and I don't remember anymore, it's been so many years ago, but I remember in that particular court, as a defendant, you had to read the charges against you aloud, okay? Now, I don't know how common that is, but apparently that was the deal. Well, this guy couldn't read. And I'll never forget the judge, because the judge said, "You mean to tell me that you have a degree from the University of Notre Dame?" And I believe it was. It may not have been Notre Dame, but I'm pretty sure it was. I mean, like I said, it's been a long time ago. And you can't read? And you know what he said? He goes, "I was always a good football player. I never needed to learn how to read." But he had a damn sure had a college degree, nicely framed, and I'm sure it was beautiful. You know, so, but for whatever reason, for decades now, we've been pretending that these are student athletes and it's the purity of the game and yada yada yada. When more often than not, they're slaves is what they are. They're slaves on the field, and unfortunately, they weren't the ones molesting children, but they got shafted. They got shafted, you know, and I feel bad for these college players because it's the most high-profile form of slavery in the world, and nobody wants to admit to that, you know, and nobody wants to admit. It's one of the reasons I don't watch college football. I mean, I'll watch the Ohio State-Michigan game, you know, just because I'm, you know, literally down the road from Ann Arbor. I'm in Ohio, but I'm 3 hours away from Ohio State and less than an hour away from Ann Arbor. So, you know, and it's a big deal. I watch it. That's probably the only game, and I may sometimes, once in a while, catch the national championship, but that's really it. And I mean, national championship is a joke anyway, you know, because there's no playoff system. Now, apparently that's changed. I don't know. I don't follow it all that much. I just find this whole thing to be really intriguing to me. Now, there's the $60 million. Here's what's interesting about that. So the $60 million isn't going to the victims of Sandusky at all. The $60 million is going to this new entity, some kind of a foundation that supposedly, in some sense or some way, is going to go to support people, victims of child molestation. Well, a couple of questions I have for that, because I'm hoping that the media, which I doubt they will, but hopefully the media scrutinizes this. First of all, so you got a new trust or a new foundation set up. Who's running it? And how are they getting paid? Because traditionally, most fund managers take a big chunk. So, whose brother-in-law, whose cousin, whose father, whose uncle, whose niece? I mean, I'm not accusing anybody of anything, but I do think that it's something that should be scrutinized. And why aren't the victims getting? I mean, so here's the thing. The NCAA says to Penn State, you're going to pay us $60 million. Penn State turns around, strokes a check. Okay, but the victims of Sandusky, now they've got to jump through hoop after hoop after hoop and all this legal wrangling and bullshit to get any kind of financial relief over this. Not that they're going to get any kind of mental relief, but you know what I'm trying to say here. I mean, 1 year's income. Now, having said that, I suspect that the income from football will drop because they're not going to have any bowl game money. I think that was worth like $15 million to them. So going forward, yeah, they're not going to be making $60 million a year, but it will be several millions of dollars, and I guarantee you at least tens of millions of dollars. And once again, nobody playing is going to see any of that money. They'll endure the injuries, but they're not. The saddest thing is when you see a senior in college blow his knee out. And know that he's not going to go to the NFL and he's not going to ever make any money. And chances are he's not even going to have a real education. That's what's funny. Everybody likes to point to people like Steve Young. I don't know how many of you remember Steve Young. It's been several years, but he was the quarterback one time for the San Francisco 49ers. He was the quarterback that had been Joe Montana's backup. But Steve Young took over the team. Everybody pointed at him because he was a lawyer. He was an attorney. He had an advanced degree. For every Steve Young, there's 10,000 that can't even read. Now, I'm just pointing out some realities here, people. I'm not bagging on. I mean, I know there are some people that college football is their lifeblood. I get that. I understand that. We all got to have something. We all got to have something. But so much of this needs to be addressed. So much of this needs to be addressed. I mean, first of all, let's pay these players. And at the very least, can we all agree that the players that are on Penn State's team right now need a severance? Literally need a severance. I mean, none of them are going to fulfill very few, if any, are going to fulfill any kind of dreams they've had over their years. So I think each one of those players gets $1 million. That's just kind of the way I feel about it. Here's your choice. If you take a transfer, and let's say you transfer from Penn State to Ohio State, okay, let's say you're one of the very few lucky, then you don't get the $1 million. But if you don't transfer because, whatever, then you're taking $1 million. And they still have to pay for your education. And maybe you'll get an education out of it. I mean, it's just, it's crazy. And some of these players, I swear to you, it's such a horrible system. Some of these players over the years, they would play a couple, 2-3 years, and then they'd get injured and wouldn't be able to play anymore, and they'd take their scholarship from them. So not only did they not get paid, and not only are they injured and probably going to endure pain for life, but they basically got thrown out, thrown out with the bathwater. Sad. The whole freaking thing. The whole thing is sad, in my opinion. And now, call me what you want, and I know there's going to be plenty of people that are going to be like, what? That is what it is. Tell me where I'm wrong. In the comment section, you tell me where I'm misled. Now, the only good that I see from expunging the legacy of Joe Paterno is it does send a message to other coaches, to other athletic directors, that if you don't do the right thing, there's a good chance that it will be like you never existed. Well, put a price on that. Put a price on that. However, having said that, I don't care what anybody says. Joe Paterno won more college football games in that level than any other coach in the history of the game. It is what it is. It is what it is. His legacy is that, but it's also of a man who turned his back, turned a blind eye, and helped cover up children being molested, children being hurt by people on his staff, which is a disgusting legacy to have, even if you are the winningest coach of all time in reality. So that's kind of how I feel about it. But you know what? Let's not create more victims here. Let's try to make the football players that are with that program now whole. And let's do what we can for the victims. And I surely hope that the right thing will be done. And I'm hoping that $60 million would have been dropping a bucket to them. But, and let's keep an eye on that new foundation that they've created. And let's hold their feet to the fire. Anyway, that's all I got. Let me know what you think. See ya.